Welcome in. We're really glad you're joining us today.
Absolutely. Glad to have you with us for this one.
Because, typically on this deep dive, we're looking at massive things, sweeping historical biographies or big geopolitical shifts or some groundbreaking new technology.
Right, the big macro stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But today, we're doing something a little bit different. We are looking at something tiny, a microscopic, seemingly mundane little object that you listening right now might actually have sitting in your kitchen cupboards.
It's highly likely.
But we're going to be looking at it through a very specific, incredibly unique lens. We are exploring the surprising scientific properties of a tiny seed, and we're doing it through the eyes of one of the most meticulous, disciplined, and frankly fascinating digital archivists we have ever come across.
It really is a special deep dive today. We're working from just a single source, but the depth of that source is staggering. It's an absolute masterclass in observation.
It really is.
Yeah.
So our source material today is a blog post. It's from a website called canonn.org, and the post is titled Notes on Gardening Part 822. And then the subtitle is The Gelatinous Pearls of Tukmaria, Sweet Basil Seeds.
Part 822.
Yep. Published on March 2nd, 2026. And as you're about to hear, that title, Part 822, is not an exaggeration in the slightest. Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can even talk about the seed itself, we really have to talk about the person writing about the seed.
We do. The author goes by the name Ang, and the way he describes himself on his site is, it's incredibly telling. He calls himself an old software plumber.
An old software plumber. I love that phrase so much.
It's great, right?
It really paints a picture of someone in the trenches, fixing leaks in the code, connecting the pipes of the internet, just keeping the whole digital ecosystem flowing.
Exactly. And he notes that he spends his nights tinkering with FLA.
Which stands for Free Libre and open source software.
Right. But it's the sheer scale of his documentation that really caught my attention when we were reviewing the site's metadata. Because if you look at the archive data on his site, it reveals a highly, highly systematic mind.
A methodical nature that is just rare to see.
Extremely rare. Ang has been blogging since 2011. And if you track the numbers, you see the steady evolution that eventually locks into a rhythm that is almost machine-like in its consistency.
Yeah, the numbers are wild.
By the time we hit the 2020s, he is publishing roughly 60 posts a month. Without fail, every single month, year after year.
I mean, he hit 732 posts in 2024, and then 730 posts in 2025 alone.
Over 700 posts a year.
That level of discipline is hard to even wrap your head around. I mean, you and I do this for a living, right?
Right.
We research and we talk about information. Maintaining an output of 2 heavily researched, deeply analytical posts a day for years on end, that requires a massive cognitive load.
It does.
But it isn't just the volume that stands out, it's the breadth of his interests. We're seeing a true polymath at work here.
That's a really great way to put it. He applies this rigorous daily documentation to highly technical software engineering topics. I mean, he has an entire series of notes on Python, Elixir, Erlang, Haskell, Rust, and Go programming.
Heavy stuff.
Very heavy, complex computer science topics that require deep focus.
But then right alongside those, in the exact same archive, he has these extensive notes on organic, slow-paced analog hobbies. He has notes on fish keeping, notes on photography, notes on meditation.
Dieting, home improvement.
Yeah. He even keeps these incredibly detailed logs of his fish breeding, things titled betta spawn logs and misc fishes spawn logs.
What's fascinating here is how a software engineer's brain processes the physical world. A programmer is trained to look for systems, to identify bugs, to optimize processes, and above all, to document everything so the knowledge is shared.
Right, the open source mindset.
Exactly. You see that commitment to open knowledge in the organizations he explicitly supports on his site. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, the Free Software Foundation, the Tor Project, Wikipedia. He fundamentally believes in making information accessible.
It's just a beautiful juxtaposition. You have a guy who is writing a library to read Erlang one day, and the very next day, he's writing notes on Gardening Part 824, My Bougainvillea Journey.
He treats his organic hobbies with the exact same level of scrutiny and tracking that he applies to writing code.
So when that specific type of analytical brain turns its attention to a tiny little seed, the observations are going to be incredibly precise. Which brings us to the actual subject of that March 2nd post, post number 822 in his gardening series. He shifts his focus to a seed that is typically used in cooking, specifically something called Tukmaria.
Tukmaria, it's a striking word.
It really is. Ain points out that the word Tukmaria has Persian origins. And if we dig into that history a bit, it's actually derived from Tukmaria, which translates roughly to seeds of basil in Persian.
It has a massive historical footprint.
Oh, huge, particularly in Ayurvedic and Unani medicine. It stretches back centuries before it ever became this trendy, modern culinary ingredient. But if you're looking for it in a standard English-speaking grocery store, you would just be looking for plain old sweet basil seeds.
And Ang is very careful to clarify a distinction right out of the gate here. He notes at the very beginning of the post that he's talking strictly about the seeds themselves, not the mature sweet basil plant.
Right.
We are focusing entirely on this dormant, tiny black speck.
And even then, he can't help but put his software developer debugging hat on when it comes to the name, because just calling them sweet basil seeds isn't actually precise enough for him.
Not for someone who builds software systems, no. As he explains, sweet basil is a generic umbrella term. Botanically speaking, it covers a wide variety of cultivars that fall under the species Ocimum basilicum.
But Ang doesn't settle for the generic term. He looks at the packaging the seeds came in. He notes the country of origin,
Which, in this case, points to Thailand.
so he uses his deductive reasoning. Based on that country of origin and the visual characteristics of the seed, he concludes that these aren't just your standard Italian Genovese basil seeds, they're specifically Thai basil seeds. Or, to use the exact taxonomy he provides, Ocimum basilicum variety Thursiflora.
That is exactly how a programmer approaches a problem. You define your terms, you check your variables, and you get the precise output. You don't just run a script on generic data. You run it on a specific verified data set.
Yes.
It establishes the exact parameters of the experiment he's about to run, because knowing the specific cultivar gives you a baseline for its expected behavior in a given environment.
Which is important because Thai basil evolved in a tropical climate with distinct wet and dry seasons.
Exactly, which perfectly sets up the biological reaction he is about to observe.
So he has these perfectly identified Thai basil seeds, and the experiment itself is wonderfully simple. He takes these seeds, and he just scatters them in the empty spots of a seedling tray. No fancy equipment, just popping them into the dirt. But here's where it gets really interesting.
The moment of contact.
Yes,
Yeah.
the instant, and he specifically uses the phrase, the moment these tiny black seeds hit the water, they don't just get wet like a normal seed. They undergo this rapid, visible metamorphosis. They turn into what he calls gelatinous pearls.
It's a remarkable demonstration of hydration kinetics. Ang notes that the outer mantle of the Tukmaria seed contains an extraordinarily high concentration of a structural fiber called hemicellulose.
Hemicellulose. Let's break that down for a second because we are moving past standard gardening into some pretty advanced plant biology here. What exactly is hemicellulose doing in this specific scenario?
So hemicellulose is a complex matrix of polysaccharides found in plant cell walls. But in the case of the Tukmaria seed's epidermal layer, these specific fibers are highly hydrophilic.
Meaning they really, really love water.
They have an intense molecular affinity for water. When they come into contact with moisture, a massive osmotic gradient is established. The fibers essentially binds to the water molecules, causing the pectin-like structures in the seed coat to rapidly uncoil and expand outward.
So it's not just absorbing water into the core of the seed. It is physically restructuring its exterior layer on contact.
Exactly.
It builds this translucent, mucilaginous halo that perfectly wraps around the entire black core of the seed. You can literally watch the chemical reaction happen in real time.
It creates a distinct, chewy, jelly-like exterior almost instantly.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
If you wrap a seed in a tight, wet jelly layer, wouldn't that just invite root rot or fungal infections?
That's a fair question.
Because usually if you have constant moisture trapped against a seed in the soil without any airflow, you're just asking for mold to take over before it ever has a chance to sprout.
It's a very logical concern, and it is exactly where the evolutionary brilliance of this specific hemicellulose structure comes in.
Yeah.
This mucilage layer isn't just a dumb sponge. It is a selectively permeable barrier.
Okay.
It holds water tight, yes, but it still allows for gas exchange. Oxygen can pass through to the germinating embryo. Furthermore, researchers studying these types of mucilaginous seeds have found that this gel layer actually acts as a buffer against extreme temperature fluctuations in the soil, and in some cases can even inhibit the growth of certain pathogens. It's a highly regulated microclimate, not just a wet blanket.
A selectively permeable microclimate. That is incredible. And because it creates this distinct jelly-like exterior, Ang immediately makes a practical, real-world connection outside of the garden.
He points out a very popular culinary application. Because of that unique texture, Tukmaria is a fantastic alternative to bubble tea pearls.
Boba.
Boba, yes.
If you love the chewiness of boba in your milk tea, but maybe you want something that isn't made of pure tapioca starch, these basil seeds offer that exact same mouthfeel. But from a nutritional standpoint, they bring a massive amount of dietary fiber to the table, specifically because of that expanded hemicellulose layer we were just talking about.
It's a great example of Ang's cross-disciplinary thinking. He's writing a gardening post, but he instantly connects the botanical properties of hemicellulose to a dietary alternative. The physical trait that makes it interesting to a botanist is the exact same trait that makes it valuable to a chef.
So what does this all mean? We have a seed that turns into a jelly pearl. It makes for a great high-fiber boba substitute. But Ang is writing a gardening log. What is the actual biological purpose of this hemicellulose reaction? Why did nature design this specific species of basil to turn into a gelatinous pearl the second it rains?
That is the core question, and it reveals the gardening superpower of the Tukmaria seed. Nature doesn't expend energy creating complex polysaccharide matrices just for fun textures in a beverage. That translucent jelly layer serves a vital evolutionary function. It is a proprietary personal water reservoir for the seed.
By instantly trapping and holding moisture right against the core, the hemicellulose layer ensures that the seed doesn't dry out, even if the surrounding soil loses its moisture to the sun or the wind.
Exactly. Think about the tropical environments where Thai basil naturally evolved. You have intense heavy rain, followed by periods of intense heat and rapid evaporation.
Right.
If a seed relies purely on the soil around it staying wet, its chances of survival are slim. By generating its own moisture-retaining halo, it creates a buffer against erratic rainfall. And the direct biological result of that advantage, as Ang notes in his log, is a significantly higher germination rate compared to other plant species.
He doesn't just guess at that either. He has the proof right there in his seedling tray. Because he tracks everything so meticulously, he has a specific metric for success. He reports that he saw multiple seedlings begin to sprout just 2 days after sowing them.
2 days is an incredibly accelerated timeline.
It's crazy fast.
For anyone who has ever planted a garden and spent 2 weeks staring at bare dirt, wondering if they overwatered or underwatered, a 2-day germination period is staggering.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it has massive historical implications when you think about it. Basil is a globally dominant herb. It is used in cuisines all over the world. And a big reason for its historical proliferation is likely tied to this exact hemicellulose trait.
Because it survives.
Because it can survive erratic watering and germinate faster than competing weeds. It gave it a massive evolutionary edge. It made it incredibly easy for early agricultural societies to cultivate and travel with. It's a survivor.
And that resilience leads Ang to a very definitive verdict in his post. Because these seeds are so easily available in the cooking aisle, because they're so affordable, and because that hemicellulose reaction makes them germinate so incredibly quickly, he decides that sweet basil is going to be a permanent staple in all his future seed germination projects and collections.
It passes the software plumber's ultimate test. It's highly efficient, it's remarkably reliable, and the underlying biological system works flawlessly every time you run the program.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this short daily blog post perfectly encapsulates the immense value of this kind of meticulous, cross-disciplinary observation. Here we have a software engineer, someone whose day job involves entirely abstract digital architecture, applying his systems-level debugging mindset to the physical world.
And he's doing it openly. That's the part that really resonates with me. He didn't just notice this cool trick a seed does and keep it to himself.
That is the open source ethos in action. By simply watching a seed expand in water and bothering to research and write down the biochemical mechanics of why it happens, he synthesizes botany, culinary arts, and his own gardening practice.
All in one place?
Right. He learned about hemicellulose from reading the shared knowledge of others, and now he is documenting his own field test, part 822 of his gardening journey, and adding his specific data points back into the public domain. It's an ongoing collaborative effort to understand the world, hosted on a personal blog.
It makes you appreciate the people out there who take the time to document their lives and their hobbies with this level of rigor. Those 60 posts a month aren't just a personal diary. They are an open-source manual for navigating reality, one tiny detail at a time. It makes me want to look a lot closer at the seemingly mundane things around my own house. There are complex systems operating right under our noses, even in the spice rack.
It absolutely should encourage that kind of curiosity. And actually, it leaves us with a really fascinating concept to ponder regarding that hemicellulose reaction we spent so much time on today.
Oh, I like where this is going.
We talked about how that selectively permeable jelly layer acts as a personal water reservoir for the Tukmaria seed, ensuring its survival by trapping moisture instantly while keeping pathogens at bay. Well, imagine if we took a page out of Eng's book and applied an engineering mindset to that biological mechanism.
Okay.
If a high hemicellulose layer allows a tiny basil seed to trap and hold its own water supply in hostile environments, how might material scientists mimic that exact botanical trick?
You're talking about biomimicry on an agricultural scale.
Exactly. Right now, we use synthetic hydrogels in some agricultural applications to retain soil moisture, but they often rely on petroleum-based polymers that don't break down cleanly.
Right, they just sit in the soil.
But could we develop new, fully biodegradable water retention materials based directly on the molecular structure of the Tukmaria seed's outer mantle? Materials that could be mixed into the topsoil in drought-stricken regions, instantly capturing scarce rainfall, expanding just like those gelatinous pearls, and holding that moisture directly against the roots of crucial crops.
It's a tiny seed, but the molecular mechanism it uses to survive a dry spell in the tropics could potentially hold the blueprint for solving massive global agricultural challenges as our climate shifts. What an incredible thought to leave on. From an old software plumber's seedling tray to the future of drought-resistant agriculture. That is the magic of looking closely at the world and sharing what you find. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope it inspired you to notice the gelatinous pearls and hidden systems in your own life. We will catch you on the next one.